A couple of notes when it comes to manager level roles, going especially through a phone interview, because oftentimes by the time that you get to an on-site interview, you take it more seriously and you realize that you're actually going through a behavioral interview. And what do I mean by this? I simply mean that oftentimes you have a tendency to answer these questions in a rather general fashion. Like, for example, a very commonly asked question for manager level roles in phone interviews is, what's your management style? And most of the time people are inclined to say, hey, my management style would probably be this, would look like that, and if this situation would happen, I would address it this way. When in fact, this is actually a too general of an answer. And to explain a little bit how this interviewing, how behavioral interviewing works, is basically they look at your past experiences in order to predict your future performance on the job. Whereas if you go general, the chances for them to screen you properly will decrease. And this is why you'll often get asked, okay, can you give me a specific example, or can you get to the point? So most of the time, these questions must be answered with specific scenarios. Okay, now to go to my previous example of what's your management style, but how could you go about one specific scenario that would showcase your management style? Well, truth be said, most of the time you cannot, so you will need multiple examples. Yes, and I would definitely encourage you to use multiple examples here. Now, this brings me to the second piece of advice, that usually the traditional advice for junior and mid-level roles is to answer any behavioral question in the STAR format. And this advice could also apply for manager level roles, with the obvious note that you are supposed to be a great communicator and you should really think out of the box when it comes to these rather basic STAR methods. So instead of just presenting one STAR answer, one situation where you exhibited a certain management style, why wouldn't you present 3 of them? With, of course, the condition that you would communicate this in a very concise way. The answer won't get boring. You know what I mean. So this would be the second advice here. The third piece of advice, especially for phone interviews, but also for the on-site interviews, is focus on your strengths. So there's that one thing that characterizes you. For example, I just spoke with someone from the financial industry, and she said, then I'm the fixer. Right? So that's how people like to refer to me whenever they ask me to do something, some projects. Okay, so then all great with this. So it means that by the end of the interview, that interviewer must remain with the picture of Tomas as being the fixer. It might sound counterintuitive at first, but the best interviews, the best candidates, the people that interview the best always focus on their strengths throughout the interview. And this begins with, tell me about yourself, why do you want to work here, and all the other subsequent questions. The idea is always to focus on your strengths. Another thing you might want to take seriously here is, many of you, especially the ones that do not have a lot of experience with behavioral interviewing, is, besides of the fact that, hey, yes, you may go general in the beginning. Okay, let's say you found a specific example. Now, the other challenge is that whenever you're getting asked a follow-up question, you tend to develop too much on trying to clarify things for too long. So there's no magic formula for how long should you take to answer any question in terms of timing, but there's always this idea of urgency, of being concise and to the point. And this is a professional experience, and if you spend 5 minutes to explain on a follow-up question on whatever behavioral question, it most likely not going to play to your advantage, because you risk of making the conversation boring and communicating over and over again the same idea that you already transmitted, which in a longer presentation might be a good thing, but in a phone interview where people have to do their job, it's not as interesting as this. So the advice here is stay concise in the follow-up questions, follow-up answers that you give. And last but not least, If you're looking for insight, whereas to what types of questions should you expect during the interview, besides the question that I have on my YouTube channel, I will also link a couple of them in the video description. Keep in mind that it's more often than not that, especially for manager level roles, companies will share the core competencies that they are most interested in within the job description itself, because they tend to pay more attention to crafting this job description. So give it a good read, maybe connect it with the company's core values, leadership principles, and more often than not, you will get a very good understanding of the types of questions you might expect during a phone interview or any job interview for that matter.